Loreheads, and welcome to The League, exploring the League of Legends lore from A to Z. My name is Rebecca.
And I'm John.
My name is Mark.
And today, we're talking about the Rise of the Sentinels event. Not a champion today. Many, many champions. Is this what it was officially called, the Rise of the Sentinels event, by the way?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so it technically launched July 8th, 2021, although they'd been laying the groundwork for many years.
Yeah.
Not that you'd be able to tell by looking at the event.
How dare you? It was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all really liked it. I think I could speak for all of us.
Episode done. If you're someone who liked the event, stop listening now.
Now, I will say, too, as we mentioned in the intro, in case you're new to this, we are going through the champions A to Z, which means there are lots of champions we have not made it through yet.
Yeah.
And in a lot of those cases, that means we just have not read their lore yet. So there are going to be certain champions that either were part of this event or should have been part of this event that we might not have a whole lot of context into. We read into it a little bit, but just be aware, there's probably more wrong with the event than we're even going to go over.
Yeah, I learned that even just watching Dinka K's rant, because she had, she's read all of it. She's read every fucking lore ever that,
I liked her
that
spreadsheet.
existed. Yes, she has a whole, John loves a nice spreadsheet, so that was an exciting moment. But yeah, so, part of the fun of this podcast is us learning the lore. I think me in particular, I think the two of you know a little bit more than I do. So I don't even know, just how much this event didn't follow its own lore and its own stories and its own canon. But even with that, even with the small knowledge I had, I still knew that this was fucked up.
Yeah. It's a bit scuffed.
Yeah.
A bit. Yeah, a bit.
So what do we want to start with? God, there's so many different retellings of this same bad story.
I know.
Where do we want to?
Well, before we bitch, I don't want to. This is no shade on the individual writers, by the way. I think I can say that for all of us. This is definitely the fault of the higher ups who was yeah, ship it as is. All of this. I feel like the individual writers probably didn't have a lot of say in what was happening, and also probably didn't have all of the info either. They were just kind of given some basic instructions and told to go with it, and didn't really have any of their say, is my guess.
Yeah,
sure.
This was a marketing event.
Yeah, because they had some great writers here, but yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I would pay actual money to be a fly on the wall in all of the various RCAs and postmortems that I'm sure have happened and are going to happen about this thing, just to know what internally has Riot identified as the problem, and just I would love to know more about that. Not that I ever will, but
I don't know, maybe there will be a Reddit post one day, but
maybe.
Yeah, I don't really know the best order that we should go in. There were some comics.
I thought maybe chronologically, because we can talk about some of the stuff that was how I organized it in my brain. I'll say was there's pre-release stuff and things that are setting the tone and the groundwork, like you said, and then there's the actual event, and we can kind of go through those if that makes sense to you all.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah,
so what was the pre-release stuff really? I feel like from my memories, this was probably the best stuff. Was the stuff that yeah, and that's why it was so disappointing when the event happened. Hyped. Yeah, because there was some good shit.
So in my mind, stuff is I guess something that you guys kind of mentioned at the very start is that the Ruin King as a character has existed in League lore for a while, right? And that's an important thing. Just I'm noting it now because we're going to revisit that later. Is that he's an established character, even if we didn't know his name or what he looked like. We knew there was the king, and we knew that he had pre-existing relationships. There are characters who are allies. There are characters who are enemies, right? We just saw that with Hecarim. Hecarim has had direct, he was whispering in his ear. That's an important thing to understand about, even before we talk about the event. It's just the context for especially people who are interested in the lore. Is that the Ruined King? It used to be the biggest deal. Remember when the Twisted Tree line got revamped to do Shadow Isles? It was you got these tidbits about what had happened, and that was the king idea got introduced and all this jazz. But
I definitely think the reveal of Viego was so unique for Riot, because Riot is constantly dropping these little things in the lore, and you're are we ever going to know what this is? And to actually find out who the Ruin King was and his whole story, and then to have a full-on conflict with him, that was a massive deal. And it was really so exciting to see who the Ruin King was. And
those abs.
Sure.
I think everyone loved them.
Yeah. Ew. And his pasty little simp body. Yeah, sure.
It is funny that you talk about that because I put together a little timeline just so I could, like, again, this was me trying to understand how do I even approach this big of a fuck up, right? And that's like the very first thing on the timeline is the Ruin King trailer, and everyone sees Viego, and it's like, oh my god, that's the Ruin King, and we're gonna go play and deal with him. It's like, holy shit. And then like that's at the end of October, right? Start of January next year, you get a story for Senna called Redeemed. The thing to know about that is that how it introduces the idea of the soul kind of being in her.
Now this was 2019 then, yeah? Was this 2019, the Senna story?
No. So this is 2021 is when this Redeemed one came out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
this
Ruin
was that
King
late.
trailer
Okay.
was October 30th, 2020. So
okay.
So they have that. Then they probably do. I don't remember what the holiday thing was for 2020, but they probably did that. And then next year we start getting stuff that's like, this is what the big event is going to be, right? Redeemed, Ruination cinematic comes out on the 8th of January, right? The Viego story, and then Viego gets released, and then there's a massive 4-month gap before Gwyn comes out, and it's like 6 months until we get any follow up on anything else. And that's like, to me, like the first big thing that was like, here's a problem, is like you have all this momentum building up, and then it just stumbles out the gate. And I remember feeling it like as we were doing episodes, like, are we ever going to get like the other shoe to drop on all this crap that you introduced in January, right?
Yeah.
We were so sure at the beginning of the year that like, oh, obviously, or like as soon as Action came out, we were like, oh, we're probably going to have to go back. But he's going to have lore, right? Like he's going to have all sorts of stories. Like he's so pivotal to this event. And we had to skip a few weeks for him to even get a short story. He finally has one now.
Yeah.
But like...
So maybe we'll do his episode soon, but...
Yeah, maybe. It's like a weird false start. You got a really high energy. I think, like we had all said, all the stuff at the start. The thing with all the stuff at the start, and the reason I think it works is because, at least at the time it worked, is because there was no constraints. It was like an open palette. This event can be anything. And that Ruination cinematic sets a lot of tones, right? It sets like, this is going to be a big story. There's going to be a big scale. The stakes are very high. Right, we see what's happening.
Lasting effects on
Lasting
Runeterra.
effects. It sets a serious tone, right? It says this is a serious thing that you should treat seriously because it sets a lot of questions, right? It sets a lot of like, what's going to happen? Who's going to get ruined? What happens if you have been ruined? Like if they didn't fight off? All of these various questions, and we're all prepped and ready. And they kind of amp it up, and we're riding up that roller coaster. And then for some reason, we spent like 6 months just to ride. Well, for some reason, who can guess why? But still, it's a big fucking problem, right? With the initial delivery of the whole thing, in my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can go even further back for them laying groundwork for this, because I think some of the hype even started with like Senna, like her release. Or her teaser, I guess, which is one of my favorite videos, actually, that Riot's done, even though it's so short. But there was so much build up, and that was an exciting event because that was like Lucian, his whole deal is, I want to free my wife or bring her peace, and he accomplished that in a video. And that's like kind of a big deal. And I rewatched it after I went through all this fucking bullshit, because I'm like, let me get back to some of the early stuff and when it felt good and exciting still. And there were a lot of people in the comments like, is anyone here after the disappointment of the Rise of the Sentinels event? Just kind of like looking back on the glory days when you thought, oh my god, some massive shit is going to happen. And that was a long time ago, but I think even people were like, yeah, this is going to be a big deal. Like whatever Senna just came out of this lantern for, this is going to be really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to be fair to, I guess, to the cinematics in particular, the cinematics are the things I have like the least amount of issues with
same.
in this whole thing. I have questions for sure, but they're all questions that I think probably arose from like narrative inconsistencies that happened later. I'm almost positive that those were not things that the cinematics team was presented with to deal with. They were just inconsistencies that were created afterwards.
Too many cooks in the kitchen, which we've already said in previous episodes, but that's definitely something that happened here. I agree. I think the cinematics told the story in the best way, because basically what we're going to talk about is the same story told 3 different times, completely inconsistent. And it doesn't really make... I can't believe... I was reading this and I'm like, why am I reading this story for the 3rd fucking time right now, Riot?
And how does it end differently
And how does it end differently every time? But the cinematics, like, I feel like the characters had the most personality. It kind of maybe made the most sense. And I'm a writer. I'm an avid reader. And this is like... This isn't me saying I think this is the best method of storytelling. I just think they happen to be the best ones. Because other than that, nobody had a fucking personality. I love Senna so much. Who even is she in this stupid comic we had to read and the in-game, what is it, virtual novel? Is that what they call it?
Yeah.
Visual novel. She had 0 personality in it. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right. So do we want to start from,
sorry.
We mentioned chronologically. I've got, in terms of my own notes, Ruination's probably the first thing I have chronologically. Do you have any short stories before that you wanted to go over, Mark?
So the only one that I found was released on the 6th, like 2 days before Ruination. It's called Redeemed. It's a Senna story, and how it impacts the event is it establishes more the idea that she's got Isolde in her, and she's aware of it, and she's kind of aware of the threat of Viego and what that is, which I guess is necessary so that we don't have to have whole massive exposition scenes of her learning what all that is. She just kind of knows because Isolde is talking to her, right? That's the only thing I got from that, really.
Yeah, we kind of get that she had formed a relationship with her in the Lantern, I guess. Yeah. Like they were besties in their Lantern or whatever.
They're Lantern ladies.
Where's that story, Riot? That would have been way more interesting.
Redeemed is almost kind of like that. You might like it when we get to Senna, or now if you want to go read it, but that's all.
Or in a year when we get to Senna.
All right. So then we've got the Ruination trailer. Now, before this, obviously, there was kind of like a teaser trailer, but nothing really happened in it, so we'll skip that. There was Black Mist over Demacia. But then we get the Ruination trailer.
No. The Am I wrong? I thought the Fate of Demacia video was way later. It's because I have it
way later
on my timeline.
Yes,
June 19th.
Yeah, no, my bad.
Okay.
I forgot which one Ruination was. So, to go over, I guess, the plot of Ruination, in case you're coming here having not followed any of the plot of the event, which... if you're coming here later, a lot of that stuff isn't available anymore. So you may very well, this is the first time you're hearing of it. But Ruination, this trailer is basically Lucian and Senna on their way to Mudtown. And all of a sudden, way ahead of schedule, the Black Mist comes. They go in, Viego's there. He's trying to pull the, like we just talked about, the soul of Isolde out of Senna. And... he does, and looks like he's gonna kill Senna too. Lucian rescues her. Meanwhile, various parts of the world, we also get black mist pouring out of various things. You see it in Noxus, you see it in Demacia, you see it in Ionia. So this is kind of impacting all over the world simultaneously here. So it's a pretty big deal. And then the end of the thing, at the end of the cinematic, Viego has successfully absconded with the soul bits, and Lucian and Senna are trying to decide how they're going to defeat him, and they need help.
We get a mysterious symbol that we wish we now wish we didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Now I have a few questions about the cinematic.
Okay.
Sure.
So one, and this was something that was, I guess, introduced later. Like, the cinematic does not make this at all clear unless I just completely missed it. But the read that I got from Viego pulling the soul out of Senna was that, like, he succeeded.
Yeah.
He got the soul out of Senna. But it's established later in the story that he got most of the soul out, but there's a little bit left.
It was like they fucked that up completely. They had decided in the moment of that cinematic that they were going to have Viego take that piece of the soul out of Senna, and then they decided to backtrack on it later. I hadn't seen this cinematic since it was released, and then I'm watching it, and Senna literally says, "We have to go back for her," meaning Isolde, and Lucian says no, and I'm like, wait. In everything else after this, Isolde is still inside of Senna.
Yeah.
Fucking... It would have been so much more interesting, too, if he didn't get her. Or he did get her.
Sure. Do you think that is just to help facilitate the idea of Senna, I don't want to say recklessly, but very determinately trying to go and get Viego? I don't know. Do you think that was... Because it seems that we agree that the idea that they had made a decision and then they changed it. I'm trying to guess as to like what's the main reason for that services the plot, right?
The only thing I can think of is that they really wanted to establish the power of Akshon's gun.
Yes.
That's like...
So the end of the way this all ends is with Akshon's gun, and I thought it was actually kind of interesting. But yeah, it wouldn't have worked if
it was, especially if it was just Gwen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who cares about Gwen?
That seems right. That lines up the way as
they
you're describing it.
hadn't figured out Akshon yet by this cinematic, and then they're like, hang on, we need to make his gun the hero at the end because he's our newest champion and we want people to buy him. So
yeah.
We're going to pretend that Viego didn't get that piece of his wife out of Senna.
It's like...
I'm also pretty bummed that they set up Darius, Samira, and Poppy to really be like integral to this event, because honestly, like maybe not Darius, like whatever, he's been part of a lot of things, but like having Samira and Poppy teased as like a big part of this event, I was like, fuck yeah, Samira, cool as hell. Poppy, finally get my girl out there.
Yeah.
And then and that's the last you hear of them is this cinematic.
It's strange. It makes me wonder. You know what? I would also pay money to have seen those meetings where this was all getting planned out and figured out, because you know what makes it even weirder is the fact that we still, like, immediately following this, the Ruins, well, not immediately, later in the month, the Ruined skins come out, right? And who's ruined? Still people from those same regions. Karma gets ruined again, we learn through the skins, first and foremost, somehow. Why not? Off screen. Even though
she defeats the Ruination and then gets
so insulting. Honestly, I thought that was really fucking insulting.
Yeah. I mean, Draven's ruined. Why not have it be Draven and Darius instead of Draven and Samira? Right, and then likewise, put Shyvana in there in the Demacia segment. Drop Poppy or keep her because I love her, and then that leaves us. Doesn't that leave us even more excited? Like, holy shit, we just saw Draven and Shyvana and Karma, and they're all ruined. What does that mean? Right, what's going to happen?
Yes,
and then and then we're not stuck in this weird limbo, because I remember we were doing the Draven episode, and we got to that skin, and it's like, I guess he's ruined now, but I don't know. The skin says it is, and they say it's canon, so I guess that's what happened. Right?
And what sucks, Mark, now is that the entire event happened and is over, and we still don't have much more to say about Draven being ruined or what it means or
that's a really big fucking
how
problem.
it lends to the story.
Don't worry, I've got some skin lore for him.
Oh, great. This sucked, because this Ruination, I felt like this cinematic really made it feel like all of Runeterra was being affected and everyone needed to come together to figure this out, and that was gone completely by the time the event actually happened. I wasn't feeling that way anymore.
Yeah, I did not feel I never in the event itself felt the scope of the threat that this cinematic had.
Because you knew exactly where they were going, because they released these skins and Riot dead refused to move away from the skins that they created, even though none of them made fucking any sense whatsoever, or at least most of them did. We'll complain about Vayne, I'm sure, a lot, but she's the least. I don't understand why they made her a Sentinel. It makes absolutely no sense.
She's popular, man. Come on, we all know that's why. There's a
this was a marketing event.
There's a reason that so many of these champions are Wild Rift champions, right? That's an absolute fucking reason.
I keep forgetting about Wild Rift. Yeah,
you know, I think Wild Rift. It's something I forgot about too. And then someone but as I was reading through reactions and shit to these things we don't like, it's a really good thing to point out that part of the reason the comic and the cinematics are different is because all the champions that get excised and don't show up are not Wild Rift champions.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Comic is Wild Rift canon.
Exactly. It's...
Yeah. John, that blew my mind. So the cinematics are the real canon in League of Legends lore. The comics are the Wild Rift canon, because Wild Rift has its own lore now, apparently, which is the dumbest fucking shit I've ever heard.
And there were two versions of the visual novel, one through Wild Rift and one through the main client.
I bet
and the
neither
main client one is it's main canon except for the dialogue.
Yeah, like the interactions between all the characters that you're supposed to be able to influence, that's not canon.
You know, the
that's
thing
useless.
You spend all your fucking time reading.
Yes.
That is such a big that
that's such
might
a
be the
fuck
worst
you,
thing
isn't
about
it?
this whole fucking event. I don't know. I've got the other thing that I think might be the worst, but that's pretty
Ooh,
fucking bad.
Okay. I'm excited to hear what you think is the worst thing about the event, Mark, when we get to it.
All right,
Yeah,
I've got my one last note about the cinematic, too.
Okay.
So it ends with essentially Poppy and Vayne finding the Sentinel symbol on the ground, which they didn't randomly stumble across the Sentinel symbol on the ground. It seems like they went to where this Sentinel symbol was. And my main question is, how the fuck?
Yeah.
That's another
like
disappointing
Sentinel,
thing, yeah.
like Vayne was not a like Vayne does eventually get inducted into the Sentinels, but if her costume is to be believed, she's not Sentinel yet. She's not Sentinel Vayne. She's just regular old Vayne. How the hell does she know where this Sentinel headquarters is?
Yeah, I mean that's like the least of my complaints about this, because you could easily, that's something that can be fixed with like a single line of quality dialogue, right? Where Vayne's like, I've heard through my contacts, or even Poppy is, right? Like I've been, the Sentinels are full of heroes because she's always looking for the hero of Demacia, right? So, maybe she's an old Yordle, right? They're super magic beings. She can know about that shit, I guess. But
so those were all my Ruination specific notes.
Okay.
What did we have next in the timeline? I've got, the last thing I have is Before Dawn. Anything in between Ruination and Before Dawn that we wanted to...
so fucking... No,
Oh, all right.
To be fair, a lot of what's on my timeline is things like skin releases, champion releases, just so I could try and help understand the context of, like, I forgot what things were like 4 months ago.
Yeah, I'm glad that you put this all together, because it all kind of blended together and I didn't remember what came first. I forgot that the Ruin skins were released so early on, actually.
Yeah, I kind of did too. And then, like I said, I remembered we talked about in the Draven episode, and I remember feeling very weird. This might have been one of the first red flags where it was like, that's weird. The skins are just dropping massive event. Like Karma's skin is a really good example of where the skin lore is... It's like, hey, that's a really world-changing thing that's happening that you just told me through a skin with no support through any other means.
Before the event,
it's like, it's a little odd. Other shit is like Viego gets released, Gwen gets released. Again, like I talked about, big 6-month gap. Viego, when he got released, had a color story that essentially helps establish what's going to happen in the event. He's out looking for pieces of Isolde, the fetters, and he's wrecking the place in the process. It's really the only thing to know. There's a Callista story that got released. So we're from January. Gwen got dropped in April. So now we're in mid-June, 16th. Callista gets a story, and that has a single paragraph that just happens to mention that, oh, this is a harrowing that's way worse than the other harrowings. Whatever, right? It's mostly Callista. It doesn't matter. But then on the 19th, we get that Demacia, the Fate of Demacia teaser, right? Where they're like, hey, we didn't forget. It's still happening. It's still happening, everyone. Important thing to note, I didn't complain a lot at the time. I will now. Like, all of the art in that thing, pre-existing art assets, right? Very easy video to put together, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just an important note, I guess.
If it had led to something much bigger, I'd be fine with it, but it didn't. Remember how excited we were? We were like, is this going to be the fall of Demacia? Remember how optimistic we were that we thought that was going to be such a permanent, lasting effect that happened? Because I think that's what Demacia needs, and I think we all agree to that Demacia needs to crumble in order to be stronger. And no, they're fine. But where is everyone in Demacia when this I'm so mad at this Demacia bullshit. I think this is the one region I'm the most pissed about, because it's the one region I know the most about, because we've talked so much about it with Garen and everything. I'm watching all this shit with Demacia, and I'm like, why is it Vayne and Shyvana? They're not even supposed to fucking be in Demacia. Where's Garen? Where's Jarvan? He's the king. Where's the king?
It's an excellent question. It's one of the biggest issues.
Isn't that a good ass question? Where's the king of Demacia when
it's really interesting, because when we went over the Silas Lux comic, we were like, where the fuck is Shyvana? And now that Shyvana's here, it's like, where the fuck is Jarvan?
They're like not allowed to be near each other?
Yeah, right.
Oh my god.
Oh man, it's like playing like telephone tag. It's like, oh no, okay, no, I'll call you back now.
His ex came into town and he's like, "Oh, I can't be here," so then he missed
I
the
gotta
whole
go out
Ruination.
with the boys. Him and Garen just throwing it up.
He was having a drink with Garen because his ex was in town. That's what happened.
Let's go
All
get
right,
ripped,
canon.
man. Oh man, God. So at that point, the train is out of the station, right? At that point, you can see from the content releases the spoiler of Havenfall a week later. That's fine. We established that the Ruination's coming and what's happening. It's a pretty brutal depiction of it. Again, setting a tone. There's a tone, right, that's being set for what the Ruination is and what this event is. It's dark.
This is a big deal,
serious.
everyone.
Yeah. And then on the 6th, we get the story so far featuring voiceover from Akshan. So it's like, this should have, in my mind, been a little bit also of a red flag, where it's like, this is like, you're teasing a new character who we don't know, and you're using this really old character with a lot of pre-existing relationships. It's a little, I don't play Among Us, but it is a little sus that Akshan's giving the VO, that he's the one narrating. It's interesting.
You know what? I didn't think about this, Mark, and I was just saying I thought it was kind of interesting about Akshan's gun and that being the end of Viego or whatever, and it kind of was. But why the fuck did they just throw Akshan into this big event at the end? It should have just focused on the champions they'd already focused on, right?
I mean, we all know why.
I imagine, like...
I know. God damn it.
I think he could have worked. If you had him be around really early on, and he had spent a lot of time, assuming that the visual novel, works. Like, if that part works, and it's just whoever you put in there is going to come out looking good, then throw him in really early on. Have him be the guy. Instead of the rookie, have him be the one who's at the Sentinel base.
Oh my god, right? Or if, because Riot works on champions for a really long time before they're released, right? So I think they probably had the mechanic of Akshan and him going. So why not just like hint about his gun really early on? Because that's the thing, right? Like, you hear of a mysterious weapon that can bring people back from the dead if you get revenge. That's super fascinating. And to drop that in really, really early and then have that be the catalyst for Viego's downfall would have been cool.
It would have been cool. You know what else it would have done?
Yeah.
It would have helped make so much of what happened. We're getting into visual novel shit that I want to complain about, but
I know, my god.
like, that's the big problem with the Absolver, is that it makes you realize that like 3/4 of what's happened in the visual novel doesn't fucking matter. Nothing has been gained.
Yes.
Nothing's happened, and you just, the moment you like kind of hear about it and see it, you just know, okay, so that's how we're going to solve this problem. So why are we even bothering with any of this other shit?
It's true.
Anyway, but yeah, I think after that we're into Before Dawn. The next day, so Akshan. So we got the story so far. The next day, Akshan teaser, and then the next day, Before Dawn. Right?
This was a big one. So this is the Shyvana is now ruined in Demacia cinematic.
Yes.
Yeah, this was I liked this one a lot.
Yeah, it was cool.
Mostly. They're like I think we were talking about the despoiler of Havenfall and how we never really got to see what Ruinations are like for like normal people in cinematic form. And I think this obviously lacked a lot of the brutality of something of Havenfall, but we do get to see at least normal soldiers in this one trying to fight wraiths completely ineffectively.
Yeah.
So that was nice to see. Basically, the storyline of this is Ruination is happening over Demacia.
Garen and Jarvan are out having a drink.
All the MVPs are gone.
But Vayne's here.
Vayne's here. Shyvana attacks. Vayne and Shyvana fight. Vayne's getting rocked, so Lucian and Senna show up. The three of them team up, defeat Shyvana, and then they induct Vayne into the Sentinels to, help end the Ruination. That's, high level. It looks cooler than I described it. But.
Yeah.
It was pretty neat. If I didn't know... At the time, I knew less about Vayne, so I knew she didn't like magic or monsters, so I kind of accepted like her joining the Sentinels pretty quickly. But knowing a little bit more about her now, because Dinka K talked a lot about Vayne, and I think Necrit also, in the video I watched, talked about how Vayne straight up just murdered her mentor like instantly after finding out that she did magic. So I cannot stress enough how frustrating it is that Vayne is in this fucking... is in the Sentinels whatsoever. It doesn't make any sense at all. But anyway.
Now, I will say to that point,
Okay.
I think it is, my read of it, at least, I mean, she doesn't like magic for sure, but my read of it, at least in The Mentor, was not necessarily that she killed her mentor for doing magic, but her mentor was kind of like a shapeshifter, and she killed her mentor for being a monster.
Yes.
Okay.
I think she has a bigger problem with monsters than she does with magic.
Yeah, that is something that I saw. That is a take that I saw a few times that I agree with you, John, where it's not so much magic, although I'm sure there is some overlap there. But yes, it's more about exactly monstrous things or things, something even just looking like a monster.
Yeah,
almost
she's Demacian, so like she doesn't like magic, but like that deep hatred is more of monsters.
Yeah, and you could I think you could get it to a point where she could work in this, but you would have to have so much changed about the story that I mean you're talking about an entirely different thing at that point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about this more when we're I inevitably at the end talk about how this could have been better. But having more individual stories about the characters they wanted to put in this, I definitely think would have been one way to help. More like the Bilgewater event, which is another thing I kind of want to talk about in comparison to this one. Because this is like, I think one of the first big lore events since the Bilgewater event, which I feel like was way more successful because it made a lot more fucking sense. But they really focus on like individual characters and what their involvement was and their developments, and I think something like that could have been better. Instead of telling the same story 3 times, maybe give me a story about Vayne herself and her being conflicted about joining these magical folks and using a magical weapon.
Yeah. I think, I mean, obviously we've mentioned it's a marketing event. We know that that's what a lot of this was. Probably one of my favorite things about the Bilgewater event, I think there was one skin, and it was out of necessity because they needed to give GP a fake arm.
It also was...
And that tied into the actual story. We didn't get like a whole line of like, pre-post...
When did the Cutthroat... Like, because I know they have the Cutthroat, Graves, and TF skins, but I thought those came out kind of at the end. Like, after all the story had dropped... It was then like, and here's the skins, right? At the end of it all. Here's your little reward for suffering through Gangplank being dead. I don't know. Is that right? Or am I wrong?
I don't remember exactly what the timeline on that one was. I know we didn't get Alawi, even despite her being a part of the story. Like it was like a lore event for the sake of lore, which felt
for, like,
real
the
pure.
Passion of lore. It also was around the time of Gangplank's rework, right? It like lined up with its rework, which was very cool. Like that was a very unique way to insert a rework, and probably made a lot of people buy the champion too. So despite it not being,
get disappointed.
I mean, after finding out he was still alive.
So I'll say a few notes about this one. Mm-hmm. I really liked the line close to the beginning that Senna has when Lucian pops out and sees like full dragon Shyvana, and he's like, "Oh man, that's big." And Senna's just like, "All right, we'll shoot it twice."
Yeah, they have
the shit Lucian get in there.
A lot more chemistry in the cinematics than they do in any of the other things. They don't seem like a cute couple in like the comic or the visual novel.
Man, when those two are on screen, it's like you have a couple that they're interacting and they seem nice, but you can just tell that when they get home, it's just a massive fight's about to fucking happen. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna go hang out with fucking Rengo. Excuse me.
Right.
I know.
They even address,
but they're cute in the cinematics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know we like read the synopses and like watched a lot of the things, but they even mentioned like Gwen at the end of the event is like, are you breaking up?
Oh my god.
Right?
I saw that.
Like,
oh my god.
Man. Yeah. But yeah. I agree with when I was rewatching this, I was thinking of what you said about, it's nice to see this Helmet Bro, he actually gets it knocked off. He upgrades to a beard bro, right? and then he gets blown away. So that was violent enough for me. I don't need, especially in the cinematics where they've got to be a little more PG. I'm fine with a guy getting just kind of cindered kind of off screen. That's fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Another thing I liked too was, when they kind of defeat Dragon Shyvana and Shyvana converts back into just normal person Shyvana, Vayne goes to just shoot her, obviously, because that's what she's gonna do, and Senna's like, no, she's fine now, and Vayne's like, no, she's not fine, she's a monster. And Senna's like, no, Viego's the real monster. And I like that like innocence that like, oh, she She assumes the best of Vayne. She assumes like, oh, Vayne, it's cool. But no, Vayne just would have murdered her Ruination regardless.
Yeah.
This could have been an interesting time to develop Vayne as a character too, because I think she's just so the worst. But having like like I said, like a conflict here where she's really trying to work through her own shit. She could have actually had some character development in this event.
Absolutely.
But that would have been a lasting thing, and they clearly didn't give a shit about that.
That's a real fucking shame, because I didn't think about that too much. I knew there was problems with her doing a lot of the things she does, but it's when you start talking about like, oh, if you just make these what seem like pretty straightforward changes, all of a sudden you can just see it being so much better. It really starts to fucking hurt. You know what I mean?
I know. I'm fine with it being a marketing thing. You want to sell skins, I get it. And you're like, okay, we want to ruin Draven's skin because people like Draven and that'll look cool. Fine. But give me a story explaining why he's ruined and how Darius is affected by this. If you want to tie it to the lore, then tie it to the fucking lore. If you don't want to tie it to the lore, then don't tie it to the lore.
Just leave him out.
But do one of them. Don't half-ass it, you fucking piece of sorry.
No. It's entirely right. Like, God, you know how you fix all of those ruin skins is you just put a little like half a sentence at the start. It's like, in a universe where Draven blah blah blah, right?
Yes. Like the arcade skins or something.
They do for every other skin.
Every other skin.
Because otherwise it just doesn't... I'm still mad about Sentinel Graves. That's another one that doesn't make sense. A Sentinel Graves story would be delicious. Tell me why he's a Sentinel. Give me a story about it.
Tell me how he feels about Twisted Fate not being a Sentinel.
Yes. Is he ruined? Is he okay? Are they friends still? Give me something.
Graves is clearly still interested. He's digging Akshan's shirtless body.
Oh, true, he was.
There's still those feelings there, I know.
I guess. Well, that's the problem. He's got those wandering fucking eyes, right?
TF couldn't be around it. He was like, you're looking at Akshan too much. You're hurting my feelings.
Oh, he's always like that. He'll be fine.
All right. True. Now we might be to the part where following timeline isn't possible because we're going to get simultaneous timelines told in divergent ways.
Do we want to
start visual novel or comic?
Probably comic. I think we're going to have a lot more to say about the visual novel. Yeah. All right, so the comic was 6 issues. I want to say I really like the Riot comics. I think they're phenomenally done. They're really beautiful. This felt very unfinished, did it? I don't feel like I can critique art and art styles and stuff like that, but it didn't feel polished.
There's a weird mosh of there were points in it where it looked seriously drawn, and there were points where it was kind of almost chibi drawn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Weird.
And sometimes a little too cartoony. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it didn't really follow a style, and it just didn't feel like a completed comic. It felt like it was supposed to have more passes.
Maybe.
I don't know. The first issue, though, is just a very long speech about love that kind of happens throughout all of these. And we see Viego and Lucian each losing their wives and their drive to do something about it. And that's kind of the first one.
Now, I did not like this parallel because it's a weird parallel to try and draw between two people's loves. And I think it's very telling that they have a montage of a bunch of scenes that are supposed to demonstrate the love of these two couples. It's very telling that the montages of Senna and Lucian seem to span years of their marriage. And every single clip that they had of Isolde and Viego was on their wedding day.
Yeah, they had a day together.
They had those were all their happy memories. Were in that one day.
It was a really good wedding.
It was really good.
They got U2 to come play, man. It was intense. Okay.
That's your mark of a good wedding, Mark?
I don't know. I was just trying to think of somebody who you could reasonably book for a wedding. I don't
what makes a good wedding? Motherfucking U2 shows up.
How impressed would you be? You go to some fucking wedding and U2's there.
I guess that's true. I don't even like U2, but I'd be very impressed.
But I think there's a very clear line here between the love that they were showing between Senna and Lucian and the infatuation between Viego and Isolde, or maybe even just on Viego's part.
Real quick.
Also, they have...
In your mind, if they had shown more similar scenes for Isolde and Viego? Would that have been would that have worked for you? Is it just that do you feel like they didn't properly establish that, or do you think that if that's how they're going to depict it, then it's a bad comparison to draw?
I think it would have worked better for me. I don't think it still would have. It wouldn't necessarily have been perfect for me because I think they still try to make like a big what would you do or what wouldn't you do, and there were clearly lines that Lucian was not willing to cross. Like the whole time he was trying to revive Senna.
We haven't gotten there quite yet, but yeah.
Yeah, but he was like taking breaks to help people and like rescue people.
That's true.
So like it seemed like the comic was trying to be like, this could happen to anyone.
I didn't get that. I got that you're showing two men who lost their wives and they handled it very differently. I think they were really trying to show that Viego and Lucian, while they were mourning and grieving and wanted revenge in some way, were also very different people. I wasn't getting the vibe that this could happen to anyone. They were like, look at how Viego handled this and then look at how Lucian handled this.
I feel like a lot of the subtext happened off comic. Like the fact that they were handling things more differently. Like a lot of the murdering of Viego, a lot of that was in the short stories that we read and shit. A lot of it wasn't in the comic, and a lot of the Lucian helping people wasn't in the comic.
Yeah, I didn't see either of those. But what they were showing is Viego, and this is later comics, we haven't even summarized this yet. Viego was ignoring advice people were giving him and treating people like shit. This is what they actually did show in the comics. He disgraced the Blessed Isles to save his wife, and then Lucian got to a point where he's like, I just want her to find peace. He wasn't trying to resurrect her. So I don't know. I think what they were showing in the comics worked fine. Like, I didn't need the murder / helping people. Like, I think they were showing a parallel of these two people handle this tragedy in different ways.
I will say I was unhappy with how it was shown.
Oh, okay.
I think the big issue is that Riot seems almost unclear on how they want to depict this comparison they're drawing. It's certainly an element that is present throughout, but I mean, and then it's another issue with the fact that there's just different things happening in these different pieces of these different pieces of media. It's because I think sometimes they get mixed messages or contrary messages about what it is that they're trying to say about the parallels between these two characters, right? And I would have to look at the comic again to give you like any sort of like, this is what I think it's trying to say. It's certainly drawing the comparison, but what it wants to say about it in general is very muddled, and I think that's a big issue, right? I mean, beyond even just the comic, but I don't know.
Yeah. And I think, so there was actually just one panel in this comic, too, that I wanted to pull up real quick because it confused the shit out of me. And I think it was more, maybe it was just how it was drawn. There was like a confusing bit about like the physicality of the panel where I was very unclear as to
there was a lot that was very unclear in this comic, by the way. It did rely on you having like past knowledge of these characters and everything, I think. So what's this one?
Okay, so this is the panel where Isolde dies.
Yes.
Now, she has just yelled, Viego, move. Mm-hmm. Now, since you can't see this, although if you want to go to Universe, the comics there's a long table. Viego is sitting at the head of the table. Isolde is off to the side of the table. Now, Viego, his chair is, completely flipped as if he's gotten up very quickly when Isolde warned him to get out of the way. And you also see a dagger flying, not at Viego at all. It's flying directly at Isolde. So Isolde saw the thing coming enough to warn him, and Viego had enough time to stand up and push his chair out of the way. But this death shot for Viego is still just aimed right at Isolde. Yeah, and has plenty of time to hit her.
Mm-hmm. I was confused by this one too, because but right before this, they show that Senna got sucked into the lantern, saving Lucian. So then they were trying to imply that Isolde took a poison dagger for Viego, which is what we thought.
Yeah, like I thought.
But it's not what it's
pushed
looking.
him out of the way or something. But she's just sitting at her seat.
She's having like breakfast right now.
Man, you brunch.
She's like sitting with her with her fucking champagne having brunch.
I'm trying to remember.
So I don't know if that was like a miscommunication.
I don't know.
Or like
I think it's supposed to be that he moved out of the way and the dagger was supposed to hit him, but it's just not drawn well.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now because I remembered the panel. I didn't remember the geometry. And yeah, you're right. It doesn't work. Oops.
Oops.
All right. But going back to the other comics, I won't summarize the second issue because we already kind of talked about it.
Although I have notes about, I have at least one note about each of these.
Okay. So what do you want? The second issue is just, this is where we see Viego take Isolde to the Blessed Isles and creating the Black Mist. This was very confusing in the comics, by the way, and if I didn't know that's what happened, I would not have known that's what happened. I would have been like, what the fuck just happened in this comic book?
Yeah, there was a quote here, and all right, so the quote is...
I don't like any of the narration in these, by the way. It's all this like pretentious bullshit about love, and I didn't like any of them.
Yeah.
What is a kingdom without its king? And what is a king without his queen? Without her, I am lost. Without me, Camivore is lost. What cost could be too high to protect that? How could any who stand against such a noble pursuit be anyone but an enemy? Camivorans do not suffer enemies. It's like... This bothered me too, because it's realistic, I guess, but it's like the exact same rhetoric that like politicians use all the time, which is just like... It's false dichotomy after false dichotomy. Like, I either revive my dead wife, or my kingdom goes without a queen throughout the rest of time. Either I am king, or Camivore falls. Either people let me do whatever I want, or those people are enemies. They're just, like, giving two options as if they are the only options, and they're like, no, none of this is true. Like...
Well, I mean, Viego's supposed to be a piece of shit, so...
I think the issue, though, is that this is, once again, I feel like Riot is not 100% on the same page as how they want to depict Viego, even, because there are some places where I find him to be depicted as, like, okay, ignoring the poor writing, at least he's got a very clear, like, he does genuinely care for her, and his goal is to do these things out of that care. But this is very much, I need to make sure that I'm king, and if I don't have my queen, I can't be king, which is very... Either one could work if that's how you want to write the character, but it just feels so random. I never know. I'm reaching into a grab bag, and I never know which Viego motivation I'm going to get, right?
Mm-hmm. A piece of writing advice I got in film school is your characters need to be consistent or consistently inconsistent. And Viego is just inconsistent. And it because they don't have him worked out. He's such a bad villain. Like, he could be a good villain, but they did such a terrible job using him. And when your antagonist isn't good, then your story isn't good. And that was a huge problem here. I mean, there's obviously a lot of problems, but Viego just made no fucking sense whatsoever all the time. He was different in every adaptation that there was.
Wildly inconsistent power levels.
Yes, the power levels. I never made any sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah,
anyway,
I agree.
Issue 3. The beginning of this issue is basically just like Senna's release cinematic, where we see her come out of Thresh's lantern. She tells Lucian about Viego here in the upcoming war. And then afterwards, that's basically just the Demacia cinematic, where Lucian and Senna are fighting the Mist and Vayne comes to help. She attacks Senna in this, though, which she didn't in the cinematic. She attacks Senna and then, but then realizes she has to team up since her weapon can't harm the Mist. My last note on this was Vayne is truly the worst. I really didn't like her in this comic. She's even worse in the comic.
She is worse in the
First of all, don't try to shoot my girl. All right?
Especially because, like, without a lot of established things, like... So it's like, Vayne is a good monster hunter. Maybe even a great monster hunter. Mm-hmm. But I don't think she has, like, a sixth sense for darkness inside of souls. Mm-hmm. Like... Mm-hmm.
So Senna's eyes kind of glow green, but the bitch could just be wearing some contacts, Vayne. Take a breath. Like, she just immediately starts trying to kill her. You don't know shit, Vayne.
Yeah, having Senna do something to, I don't know what she could do, because I don't even know what Senna can do in the context of, like, in-game abilities versus canon shit, but yeah.
Yeah, it was weird. And then having her immediately change her mind.
Oh,
immediately.
Immediately. Oh, God.
I didn't know whether this was supposed to be like a redemption arc, but it was the most unearned bullshit I've ever seen.
We don't have time to waste, man. We got 6 issues to tell this story. Man, that's all it is.
They're all very short.
Yeah.
All right, issue number 4. There are more Sentinels of Light now. Riven and Aurelia are there, but Lucian still doesn't feel ready to fight Viego. We get a flashback of how Riven and Aurelia joined. It's basically all the shit that you did in the game client. There's a moment where Riven... Oh, okay. So there's a moment... We're in Noxia, and Riven says that Noxian guards are only armored in the front.
God, I wrote this down.
Okay. While I appreciate the idea behind that, that is so very stupid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Her idea is like Noxians never turn away from a battle, so their asses aren't protected. Fuck you. No, like they're not dumb.
That's not how battles work.
That's not how battles work. People might be behind you. Noxians would absolutely have armor on their back.
They're 360-degree affairs. And even if you look at Mr. Never Run Away Darius, his whole fucking back is armored.
Yeah.
They're all armored.
Hated this. Hated this line.
In that Garen novella we read, they make a point of talking about like, oh, Noxian fortifications are designed to be able to like, 180 degrees, 360, whatever. I don't know geometry. 360 degrees back in front, they can be defended from any way possible, right? Their city is designed that way. Nox is supposed to be that like if you're trying to invade a Noxian city from any angle everywhere, they can present, threat, right?
What a wild thing to have to say.
Oh my God,
especially after downing a guard who was wearing a fucking helmet on the back of his head.
Yeah, it's not like he had a fucking like Phantom of the Opera mask on. Like, what the hell is this shit?
It's like perfectly just the front half of the armor. I would almost
just
like
naked for the back half.
Right? I would almost be okay with it if that's really what they looked like. As if like it's like a Noxian way to like punish you if you try to turn your back on an enemy and run away.
Yeah.
That would be interesting, but that's not what happened at all. Okay, so more in this comic. They get to Aurelia. There's clearly some lore tension between Aurelia and Riven that I kind of understand. I think they believe that Riven killed someone, but Yasuo did? Is that really what it is? Why do I know this? I never even read any of their lore.
She was part of a pretty big invasion.
Okay.
She was, what was she called? The Butcher of the
Bay.
Something or Butcher of the Bay. She was part of the big battle where Singed ended up killing fucking everyone.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, so I'm glad that they didn't ignore the lore for the sake of the skins, but it also, like, it feels so forced having Aurelia being like, you're the Butcher, I'll never forget. But yeah, sure, I'll join you. Let's go fight together.
Yeah,
like,
I was way more upset at
instantly.
how quickly she forgave.
Yes.
And like the comic, it happens much quicker. The visual novel, it happened slower.
I didn't get to that
But it was
point.
almost like Riven expected it to happen quicker. Like she was almost getting offended that Aurelia hadn't forgiven her yet. Like, no, you did actually kill a bunch of her people. Like, maybe cool it a little bit.
This is another instance
Yeah.
where they could have expanded on this idea with a story centered around them.
Okay, now imagine a world. I know we're not done summarizing it, but imagine a world where instead of this, we had 6 little one-shot comics that were just each of like they cut down the number of Sentinels and have it just be about each of them, right?
Yeah.
Or like a pair.
Already better.
Yeah. Anyway,
Already so much better.
Continue.
Okay, so issue number 5 is when we learn that a piece of Isolde is inside of Senna, and Viego's trying to collect all of the Horcruxes. We also learn that Thresh is the one who brought Viego back. Okay, so with the Sentinels, Lucian still isn't ready and heard of a lost Sentinel in Shurima. So he goes and meets Akshan, who's too busy about to get revenge for his teacher, Shadia, who died a week earlier. Very new. If he kills her killer with his weapon, she'll come back. Basically, Akshan leaves Lucian to die because Viego appears. Lucian dies here, and then Akshan brings him back by killing part of the Mist, I guess. I guess the Mist killed Lucian. This is so unclear and so stupid.
I think they were like specific
There were
wraiths
specific wraiths that killed him?
Okay.
Yeah.
Killed the wraiths.
Sure, fine. They just need to establish the gun, and then Akshan joins the Sentinels, and that was issue 5.
But they don't need to establish the gun because it doesn't do anything in the end of the comic.
Oh my god, you're right!
Nor do the Isolde shards, I should also say.
Yeah.
So
Also, a special quote in this comic, Viego gets very upset at Thresh when Thresh refers to Isolde as if she were some sort of property. So I really hope that there's no point in the story coming up where Viego says something hypocritical.
it's all intentional. It's very he's a very layered, intentionally written character.
Okay. Issue number 6. I like my first sentence for this summary. It was, Senna's mad because Lucian left without leaving a note, and that's fair and valid. Go Queen. All right, so the Sentinels all take an oath with candles that are apparently fueled with fucking gasoline or something. Why are they so gigantic?
Right? I love it. Like the last,
it's a stupid thing to nitpick about, but I don't care. I'm gonna bitch about everything that doesn't make sense in this comic.
No, it's great because like the last panel is Action, and he looks genuinely worried. Like, is this a fire hazard?
It's like they're holding a candle and it's a fucking blowtorch coming out of it. Like, calm down. It's probably, it's a visual thing, whatever. Anyway, this makes absolutely the whole oath was so stupid. Anyway, they fight Viego, and when I guess it's not looking so great because Viego is busted everywhere, including the comic as well as the game, Senna asks Isolde for help, and this is when Isolde is like, all right, I guess now's a good time to help everybody. Totally unclear why Isolde couldn't just come out all the time. It doesn't make any sense. It's literally just Senna's like, please, Isolde, please, I'm about to die. And she's like, okay. And like, oh God, it's so stupid. Anyway, she's like, Viego, I'm going to send you where you can't hurt anyone. And he goes, Camivore? So where the fuck is he? I can't tell in the comic. I know where he is because I've seen the cinematic, but in the comic, it's so unclear where he is and how they defeat him. Yeah. Anyway, but Lucian and Senna are all happy and can do whatever the fuck they want now. Meanwhile, Thresh is like, I'm the captain now, and takes his new lantern and his new abs, and he goes on his way.
Yeah. I like the very last panel in that issue where he's like, the real villain was me. And then there's like, the whole panel is just him going,
That's exactly what it was. He's like, they were distracted, but it was me the whole time.
Cool.
But like, the worst thing too is like, they weren't distracted. They blasted you with the same shit that they blasted Viego with. How the hell are you still here just hiding behind the throne room like a goddamn Scooby-Doo villain?
Are they gone?
I hate it.
He comes out and starts monologuing and they show back up.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, right, who was he monologuing to? Us? Oh my God.
Dane forgot her glasses. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, there's a lot here. So not all right.
Oh my God, John,
I had a lot of notes about this
your
bit.
thoughts for the last issue are longer than my entire summary and thoughts for the last issue. John's ready to pop off. Go ahead, hun.
I'm just, just a few things.
Okay, yeah.
So one, when he gets blown to Camivore through magic and shit, I feel like I really had to examine that comic to figure out why he would be stuck there as opposed to just being teleported there and being able to walk right the fuck back to the Shadow Isles. Like, I had to go through it a few times before I was like, oh, okay, I see there's some, like, vague light things, I guess, that are tying him to the throne. It was very unclear.
Yeah. Yeah, he's tethered in some way.
Yeah. Also, I know Gwen's not part of Wild Rift, but it was still just very jarring to not see her here since her whole existence is based on having a part of Isolde inside of her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of these notes you already mentioned, Mark, like, why did you recruit Akshan? Absolutely useless in this story.
Yeah.
Frankly, I would say even here where they've reduced the number of Sentinels significantly, they still don't really serve a meaningful function, right?
No, the other ones don't do shit. Fucking Riven and Aurelia are there. They don't do anything.
Yeah.
Literally, Isolde is just like, okay, I'm going to take care of him now. Could she do that the whole fucking time? I don't understand.
It's a really good question. Right? Yeah.
Also, another Thresh question. I mean, he's human here because he's human in Wild Rift. No one had any questions as to why Thresh is now randomly fucking human just chilling next to Viego? No one was like, hey, what?
Is that Thresh?
We fought.
Who's that guy? No, that's also a good point. There's a really, across all the things, like this in the visual novel especially, there's a really big issue with, I don't want to say like the lack of object permanence, but like people having like really bad peripheral vision where just things happen and they just don't see it because obviously because the plot needs it to them to not see it, right?
Yeah.
This is a little one. It was something interesting that Necrit noticed that I felt worth bringing up. There's weird inconsistencies between the thrones in all of these scenes.
Oh.
So you look at the thrones. On the big showdown in the Shadow Isles, he's sitting on the throne that used to be in Camivore, according to the art in his short story, where he's like sitting on the throne and there's a portrait of himself and he's sold right next to it. Like that used to be in Camivore, but now it's in Shadow Isles. When he gets teleported to Camivore, he's on a different throne entirely. And then at the very last comic, where Thresh is doing his little hand wringing and looking at the party walking away, all of a sudden, that throne that Viego was on in Camivore is now in the Shadow Isles, and that's the throne that's in the room instead.
Yeah, that's like fucking up. That's like a boom mic showing up, right? It's like that's just a fundamental fuck up.
That Starbucks cup
they
come from.
intentionally drew it.
This is like endemic of the whole fucking thing, and that there's obviously just no air traffic controller who just was looking at this and like, that's not right. These two things need to be changed. All right.
They needed like 2 or 3 people just in charge of the entire story. Of all of it, and they would oversee the comics, the cinematics, the in-game stuff, all of it. Like, just have a few people fully in charge of it.
A nice quality owner.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, the last thing I had on this was in the various other tellings of this story where Isolde does die, it's kind of implied, although, again, very unclearly, that when Isolde dies, it kind of revives Viego. Because Isolde is the one who killed Viego. And in like the cinematic and things, you actually see the hole in his chest seal up, which is where the dark mist was pouring out of. That doesn't happen in this comic, which means that the hole is still there, which means that in theory he should still have control of the black mist.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I didn't think about that either, but that's a good point. Because I knew that was a big kind of thing that... Because again, I've been reading reactions and perspectives on this, and that was a big thing that's come up. Is like, so, like, did he get revived? Because my read was that he hadn't, but the hole in the chest is a really good point. That in other media, he seems to have been affected in some way by the Absolver, right? But in this, like, the Absolver doesn't do shit. It doesn't do nothing. So who knows, right?
Those are all my notes for this one.
So I have a note not for this issue, but one of the previous ones. They change history where instead of Callista going out and finding the Blessed Isles and having her whole thing be that, she tried to be honest with him and got in prison for it, now Viego just found it himself. He cracked open a book, him and Lux sharing books, found all the secrets.
I was so mad about this, and I'm glad we had just did the Hecarim episode because I wouldn't have realized. And Hecarim's not in this either. And he was such a critical part of the Ruination and the whole Black Mist being created and it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
I want to share a piece of retconned lore with y'all.
Ooh, yes.
Hit me with it.
Now, is this about Hecarim?
This is about Hecarim. I know we already talked about Hecarim. This is a piece of lore we didn't cover with Hecarim, and it's a piece that was retconned, I think, probably shortly before this event. Let me just read a little snippet here. It's from his old lore, but not his oldest lore. And honestly, probably, I feel like gave a better reason for the Ruination than we ended up with. But anyway, but when the queen returned to life, this is after she was put in the water, but when the queen returned to life, she was a horror of decayed meat and maggot-ridden flesh who begged to be allowed to die once more. Repulsed at what he had done to his beloved wife, the king enacted a spell to end their lives and bind them together for all eternity. His conjuration was successful, but unwittingly empowered by the many potent magical artifacts stored on the island, and its power was increased 100-fold. A hurricane of black mist surrounded the king, spreading across the island and killing everything it touched.
That is way cooler.
That's really fucking cool. It's like again, fucking metal, right?
Yeah.
Maggot-ridden bride corpse. It's an awesome fucking metal album name or some shit. I don't know.
Yeah, especially because they had to because they weren't going with that, they had to come up with stupid reasons for why she wasn't maggot-ridden. They're like, oh, there's a spell that just preserves her and it's fine.
Yeah.
It made no sense at all. Yeah, no, that is so much more interesting.
You know what else is that this is something I felt back even when we were in Hecarim, the mechanics of what actually happened with the Ruination were feeling a bit fuzzy and wonky. that helps explain why. It's because they had come in and put some white out.
Together. Yeah. They put some white out.
It's held together with duct tape and spit, right? Yeah. Interesting. That's interesting.
Wow.
So, did we want to jump into the finale cinematic?
Ooh. Or the Incline event?
Or Incline event and end with the finale cinematic.
Gosh, I don't know. It's a short thing. I guess we could do the cinematic first. If at this point we're kind of considering it a separate line of storytelling, maybe it's better to just do it now, and we can just mention it again after we do the VN.
Sure. I would say this is probably the best finale that they came up with. It's still very rushed, though.
Mm-hmm. I can hit this one. You guys have been doing all of them so far.
Sure.
Hell yeah. Hit it up.
You're going to have the Incline event, aren't you?
So,
no, that's you, John.
Yeah,
okay,
John.
never mind.
He's just been picking up all the other shit. Which, thanks, by the way. So, no, Absolution, right? Comes out on the 3rd. I'm going off dates because that's how all my shit's organized. But what happens in this one, right? So the Sentinels have gathered, at least some of them have gathered up, and they're facing down Viego, and it seems like they've kind of laid a trap where they're going to pretend to kind of let Senna start offering up her Isolde shard, and they all jump him. But he fights back. Pantheon shows up to menace everybody for a little bit, and Viego drags off. Viego does a sweet backstab and kills Gwen, or is kind of stabs her to the mortally. She is assumedly dying, right? Mm-hmm. Also drags off Senna, drags them through his little portal that he makes. That Viego makes the portal, right?
Important distinction between me and client.
And drags them to what I assume is Camavor. It reads Shurima because of how it looks. We don't get a lot of it, but I think it's supposed to be Camavor. Is that?
Yeah, I assumed it was,
yeah.
But
yeah, that was what I got.
He puts together Isolde. Isolde comes back. Her ghost kind of comes back, and she has a little monologue. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is not her saying these things out loud. This is because she's not speaking to Viego. They don't have any actual interaction or dialogue. It's just a narrative that's kind of playing for the audience. Does that match y'all's read on that scene? It's written as if she's talking
initially,
to him.
but now that you're saying it, it makes sense.
Yeah, I wish she would have been saying it out loud.
It's
because it was like
really kick him while he's down.
She started it before she came back,
That's
so I mean,
true.
it makes sense.
It's a little weird, right? It's a lot of it is very similar to what's said in the VN, the visual novel, and that in that one they're actually interacting, right? But they're not doing
that. Was the shower speech. That was what she wanted to say to Viego. It's like, God damn it, I had all this good stuff I meant to say.
Yeah.
She landed in the lantern and then forgot.
Fuck. But yeah, so it seems like all hope might be lost, and then Action kind of shows up just out of nowhere. We didn't see him go in through the portal, but he's there, and he's got the Absolver, and he shoots Isolde, and I guess because of the way the Absolver works, that revives, or somewhat revives Viego, like we were saying, but it also brings back Gwen and Senna, who had seemingly been dying. And then they team up, and they lock away Viego, and everyone reunites outside on the other side of the portal, back in the Shadow Isles. And that's about it. Right? Did I miss anything major?
Yeah.
I have some notes.
Yeah.
Oh, you have this is almost a full page.
Well, this is the okay. So, comic Viego, call my queen a prize again, and I will flay your soul. Cinematic Viego, she belongs to me.
Yeah.
God, I wish I could get the timestamp for this. My favorite part of the cinematic is when they're all teaming up on Viego, and it starts with Graves like blowing him away from Senna with that smoke grenade, and then Lucian shoots his legs out from under him and he falls onto the ground, and then Vayne pins one of his hands onto the ground, the one that he's holding his sword in, and then Gwen starts binding his limbs, and then Akshan swings around and shoots 2 shots, and it kind of barely hits his shoulder, and you see him go like, eh.
I don't remember this. I have to rewatch that.
It was the funniest fucking thing.
And
he seemed so proud of it after.
So that's why they released some hot fixes to buff Akshan after.
That's pretty funny.
Damn.
I did not like Viego's weird face caress on Senna before he pulled her in through the portal. I felt like that was unnecessary.
Yeah, I don't know. It's yeah, I agree. It's weird. It doesn't like read at any point through the interactions in the visual novel, I would say, right? Like they're just kind of enemies, or he just kind of just sees her as like a means to an end, right? Like that's really all it is.
Yeah, like that's something a villain does when, like, I don't know, he's like, I don't know, there's some sort of like sexual thing there, or like trying to instill like power over her, but like, nah, man, you're Viego.
The Isolde part of her, you know.
I don't know. I feel like he's never had that. Every other scene we've had of them together, he's literally just walking up and choke slamming her. Like,
that's true. Yeah, it would have been dope if he dropped like a stone cold stunner on her. No, you know what would have worked there is if he had like touched her shoulder and you saw like a little glow, like the little shard blue glow in her or something to help make it clear. Good. Like he can't caress there because it's like in her chest, but. You know, or like have him even touch her cheek, and there's like something to help establish that that's what's happening, right?
Yeah, that's what he's reaching for. Yeah,
that would have worked.
No, it's just again Viego being really inconsistent and not making any sense.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Also, I was so happy that I spent hours recruiting all those characters for none of them to show up in this final fight.
Fucking be here.
You know what's
all to abandon me?
Fucked up about this, by the way, is again going back to timelines. Like this came out after the event. Like once you had finished the event, it was like, oh, see the dramatic conclusion, you know, and you even got a little teaser of the cinematic in the client, and then you show up and like you said, it's like, the fuck is everybody? What's happening?
Yeah, and like to be fair, I did see some concept art for this, and there were supposed to be more characters in this, but there was never going to be all of them for sure. Like I think the only additions were that Karma and Misfortune were also supposed to be here.
Right, I'm fucking sure.
Yeah. Also, this again made more sense in the in-client because, like you mentioned, in client. The portal is not opened by Viego. It's opened by Vex, and then closes immediately. Why in the hell did Viego leave the portal open? Why did he do that?
He was distracted. He's got a lot of shit going on. It's like leaving your keys in your front door. We've all done it once. But this one fucked up and killed him. Yeah, absolutely. A running theme, right, is like just contrivance or just things happening with no... I don't know. There's not like Action doesn't do anything cool. Like what if the portal was closing and he did some really cool shit to get past Pantheon or something? Unless I completely have removed that part from my brain, he just kind of heads off, and the next thing we know, he's there and he solves the problem, right?
Yeah, he's been creeping around and then
and like,
just there.
to be fair, like if we were to use his in-game mechanics, like cool, that makes sense. His in-game mechanic of being able to stealth is never once established, like anywhere.
Use his grappling hook thing. That would have been cooler.
Yeah,
but he's got a lot of shit he can do, man. It's hard to get it all in.
I also have a few logistical questions. Mm-hmm. I don't understand why killing Isolde revives Senna and Gwen.
Me neither.
I understand that her soul being pulled out of them is what killed them, but she didn't do that shit. Viego did that shit. Like, Viego is the one who killed them, and they didn't kill Viego, so they should still be dead.
It's, you know, it highlights a really big problem with the Absolver, which is that the mechanics are really fucking unclear, right? If you get stabbed by 1,000 different people, like, is it just whenever you happen to have died, right? Like, number 697, well, that's a lot of stab wounds. Number 7, I don't know.
Probably like the 4th one, Mark.
And, like, that begs the question, too, like... Viego is clearly not dead at the end. They bind him. They wouldn't have needed to bind him if he was just dead. Oh, God, how'd all those fucking those ruined champions were ruined by being stabbed through the heart. All of those ruined champions have stab wounds through their heart, and then when Isolde dies, they all come back to life, and they're unruined and fine.
So I remember Misfortune getting stabbed. This is getting into visual novel shit, but did Karma get stabbed and
I don't know if we ever saw it.
I thought she just ruined out. And kind of the same with Shyvana. Shyvana just like, you know, again, ruins out, right? But he doesn't show up.
Yeah, we don't... I don't think we see the stab, but they all have, so like that, like the triangle mark that Viego has is like his stab wound from the sword, and it's the same one that like Misfortune gets, and like they have the stab wound.
Yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like Pantheon, I remember getting stabbed, and see, that's the thing is Misfortune and Pantheon also were ones who did actually get stabbed, right? My question is more like, does Karma have it? Does whatever. It's the point being that you're still right? That like, yeah, they all got stabbed. Why aren't they like? What's going on?
What Riot should have done was killed them all and removed them from the game client for a little bit.
Also, I mean, even if you are considering that, like, yeah, Isolde, we're gonna blame Isolde for killing Senna when the soul, but like Gwen also just got fucking stabbed by this massive sword.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
This is, again, my Death by 1,000 cut thing, where even though she has a massive gaping stab wound, it was the soul getting pulled out that technically she happened to have died after that. I don't know.
Also, I'm not sure why when the wound closed up on Viego's chest, why all of that black mist just poured into Senna? I didn't quite catch what
I have no idea.
That was signifying.
This might be some lore thing that I'm not familiar with, because I know part of her passive, and we even see her do it in one of the other cinematics, maybe even this one. Doesn't she absorb like a little bit of a? No, she does that in the Ruination cinematic. She kind of
Ruination one,
absorbs one. So I assume it's some interaction with that, maybe. But I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. And this may have just been a consistency issue, but I'm pretty sure right before the portal closed, Viego got his stab wound back randomly in that like one shot.
I need to go look again.
It was like he was tiny, so it was hard to tell, but there was like a very conspicuous like shadow in the middle of his chest where his stab wound was that had just been completely cleared up.
Just commit.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I get the heavy sense that some of this, or at least a good chunk of this, is like, this is not what they had wanted to put together. Like you're talking about the concept art, had different ideas. This is probably just pieces of things they had that there's like, we can get something together that's this, right? So maybe that's just part of it.
Yeah. And like, again, this is just tied to power levels for Viego being unclear and specific powers of his being unclear. But like, I had assumed that the source of his power was specifically the black mist. Like, he can move super quick, but only through the black mist. He seems to be like, have all of these powers that are tied to the black mist. So when they seal his chest up and he doesn't have black mist anymore, like, is he just a dude?
Why did they freeze him? Just
do you need
kill
to
him.
bind him at that point?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Is he just a guy?
I kind of wish that was the actual ending, right? Is it and then they really clearly said, yes, look, he's just a person again, right?
And they like arrested him,
bind him up, leave him in Camivore. I don't know. There's a million things you could do, right? I find that to be a more interesting ending than him just still being some sort of weird wraith guy.
Are we at it? Are we at the visual novel?
Oh God. Let it not be said that we do not suffer for our art, man.